Hello, everyone. My name is Jody. I'm really delighted to be here with you all this evening and to have the opportunity to be part of Autscape 2021. I work as an actor, a writer, and in various other roles, mainly in theatre. That's been my main job for about the last 20 years. In the past few years, I've also worked as a writer for soap opera and for children's animation. I live in Wicklow in Ireland with my partner and my 9-year-old son. I was diagnosed as autistic in June of 2019, and my diagnosis has changed every aspect of my life and my work. And it's mainly the work part I'll be talking to you about this evening, but that also crosses over with my own personal circumstances. So I'll talk a little bit about these too. I'm really delighted to be joined for this session by Eleanor Walsh. And together we're going to share a bit with you about the play that I wrote that Eleanor performed in, which is called What I Don't Know About Autism. So I'll let Eleanor introduce herself to you now.
Thank you, Jody. Hi, everybody. I'm absolutely delighted to be here at Autscape this evening with you all. My name is Eleanor. I'm an actor and performer, and I'm also a self-advocate. I also work in the National Leprechaun Museum here in Dublin, which is a real place. I was diagnosed as autistic as a young child. Went to a school for children with additional needs for a number of years before transitioning to mainstream schooling. And it was only when I went to college to study drama that I started to learn more about being autistic and neurodivergent. And right after I finished my degree, I met Jody for the first time. She told me she was researching a play that she wanted to write about autism. And here we are almost 4 years later talking to you guys about it.
Thank you, Eleanor. So we just have quite a short time together this evening, and we'd like to use the time to talk to you a bit more about our production. And What I Don't Know About Autism premiered with a sellout run in February 20, just a few weeks before all the theatres had to close due to COVID-19. So we were very lucky with the timing of the production. The play was co-produced, as Jenny said, with the Abbey Theatre, Ireland's national theatre, and also in association with two other venues, Mermaid County Wicklow Arts Centre and the Everyman in Cork. It was funded by the Arts Council of Ireland with additional funding from Wicklow County Council and Dublin City Council. Tying into Autscape's theme of growing, developing and learning, I'll tell you a bit about the inspiration for the show and my aims in writing it. We'd like to tell you about the process of creating the show, both our aspirations and also some of the challenges we encountered in trying to create a piece of inclusive theatre that aimed to inspire social change. And then we will talk a little bit about the learnings and outcomes from the production and open up the conversation for questions and observations. We'll also share 2 video clips from What I Don't Know About Autism, and we're going to read one of the scenes live, so we hope our tech abilities and internet connections will behave themselves for the next half hour or so. So looking back, I think there were 5 key events that led to the creation of this play. The first was that in 2016, my son was diagnosed as autistic. I didn't think I knew very much about autism at that time. I certainly didn't realize that I was autistic, although I did know that my son and I had a huge amount in common. And so the first priority for my partner and myself was to inform ourselves. The clinicians who gave our son his diagnosis had recommended behavioral modification therapies, and believing them to be the experts, that was what we first researched. But after I did a course in ABA, we quickly realized that this was never going to be for our family. And then it took some time to find the right path, because there were local family support groups and networks, but they were largely not autistic-led. And we spent some time scrambling around, gathering information from YouTube videos, articles, and books. And this is how we found our way into the autistic community. It was a lucky accident. But imagine if it wasn't like that. Imagine if it didn't have to be an accident. Imagine if the clinicians who had spoken to us and given the diagnosis had provided us with a list of books and links to material created by autistic adults and young people about what would have helped them as children. Imagine how much time this would have saved us, how much it would have helped us and our son. That's what I began to imagine anyway, a path that would have led us straight to the real experts. And I started to consider how the foundations for this path might be laid. The second step along the journey to making What I Don't Know About Autism was a headline in the Irish Times newspaper in March of 2017 that read, "Nobody wants their child to be diagnosed with autism." It was one of many headlines that I read around that time that cast autism in a negative light. But this one hit me particularly hard because at that time I was beginning to tell my son about his diagnosis. But what was holding me back was that my son could read. And once he knew he was autistic, what if he had walked past the kitchen table at that moment when I opened the newspaper and he had read the headline, "Nobody wants their child to be diagnosed with autism"? How would that make my son feel? How would it impact his sense of worth, his sense of identity, his sense of security, his sense of being loved, of being valued for who he is? I wrote a letter to the editor of the newspaper, but I received no response. And so I quickly realized I was going to have to start shouting a little louder if I wanted anything to change. The third part of the journey was the time I spent with my son during these early years, either with therapists or attending activities specifically aimed at children with additional needs. What struck me was how often people talked over their children's heads, detailing their diagnoses, their challenges, their school placements in front of a whole room full of people as if the child wasn't present. I found this so unsettling. Surely one of the most basic forms of respect we can afford each other as humans is to presume intelligence. And if parents weren't doing this for their kids, if clinicians weren't seeing children as worthy of being credited with the listening mind, what hope was there for these kids in the wider community? And so I wondered how I might create something that would promote the idea that being different doesn't mean someone is deficient, that it doesn't mean that they don't have the full capacity to experience the world with a full range of emotions. The fourth impetus was a moment that occurred at a family festival in Dublin, where I watched an autistic child stimming on a bouncy castle. This child's movement was so beautiful. It was so committed and so engaged. And as a former dancer myself, it struck me that if it was possible to show this movement or this type of movement on stage, to really celebrate it, that it might make people think twice before telling autistic children or adults not to flap or run or rock or spin or do whatever they need to do in order to feel comfortable in the world. And then the fifth part of the journey took a few years, but during all of this, I came to realize my own autistic identity. And I received my diagnosis a couple of days after we finished our first development week for What I Don't Know About Autism. And so in a sense, the play became a live articulation of my own journey of exploration and discovery. So, apologies for the long preamble, but I felt it was important to share some of the key moments that brought me to the point of deciding that I would set out to write a play that A, promoted autism acceptance, and B, celebrated autistic identity. And initially, I set out to write a fictional story set in a futuristic world where genetic anomalies had been wiped out. I was going to write about the end of autism and consequently the death of innovation. But I got waylaid by the research I was doing. I began to jot down thoughts which became scenes, and after a few months I put the scenes together and realized I had written a play. The final script consists of 26 scenes that explore different aspects of autism. Some of them are fictional scenes, some are songs, some are more movement and dance-based, and some are more informational, involving direct address to the audience. Once I had the beginnings of the script, I started thinking about how I might make the production. One key thing that I felt really strongly, that this production needed not to take place in a fringe type environment where we'd be surrounded with like-minded people who would applaud our efforts but already be of a similar opinion. I wanted the show to have a wider reach, to impact wider society and media. I wanted to put it on the stage of Ireland's National Theatre. And secondly, I wanted to think very carefully about how the show would be made, how the audience experience might be different to a typical one. And that's where Eleanor comes in. So I'm going to hand over to you for the next part, Eleanor.
So in or around the same time as Jody, I was going on my own discovery, a journey of discovery as an autistic person. I was finding the autistic community online, reading as many books by autistic people that I could get my hands on, and trying to find autistic theatre makers and autistic characters in plays and theatre. And I didn't find many, especially not here in Ireland. But in my research, I would read lots about the UK's disability art scene and disability theatre scene and deaf theatre companies, companies like Grey Eye and Definitely Theatre, Oily Cart and Tourette's Hero and the Unlimited Festival and Dada Fest Festival. And it was through these that I first learned about relaxed performance. A lot of you might know about relaxed performance already, but just in case, relaxed performance, or autism friendly or sensory friendly performance, as it's sometimes called, is a type of assisted theatre performance where the rules and conventions of theatre going are literally relaxed, especially for autistic and neurodivergent people. So, for example, lighting and sound cues might be altered, a quiet space may be made available in the theatre for audience members, and audiences will receive a visual guide or a social story beforehand, so they know what to expect when they arrive at the theatre, and so on. It's all about making the theatre a more inclusive experience for autistic and neurodivergent folks, and for absolutely anybody who would benefit from a more explicit and considered welcome to the theatre. So relaxed performance really became a special interest for me. I was so excited by it. Helped facilitate a relaxed performance of my final year graduation show in college, which I believe was the first relaxed performance in Ireland that wasn't for a pantomime or a children's show. Most of the relaxed performances in Irish theatre today are still usually for pantomimes and children's shows. I wrote my undergrad dissertation on relaxed performance, and as part of that, I interviewed a theatre maker called Maeve Lambert, who directs an inclusive theatre company here in Ireland called Equinox. And every Equinox performance is relaxed, even before relaxed performance became a thing, because that's how the company works best. And through Maeve, I met Jody a few months later, and Maeve will later come and design What I Don't Know About Autism. But Jody was really adamant that if she was going to make a show about autism and the autistic community, that autistic people would be involved, autistic people would be on stage, and that the whole rehearsal process would be inclusive. And that's how What I Don't Know About Autism became a relaxed production. Jody is going to speak a little more very soon on the relaxed production, but before that, the best way to explain to you how What I Don't Know About Autism was relaxed would be to show you. So here's a clip from the show. Right at the top of the show, the whole cast, we come on stage and we explain to the audience that this is a relaxed performance and explain what that's going to be like for everybody. So I think Jody's going to bring that up for us now.
I am. I'm just going to share my screen and hope that it works. The sound is shared and I'll enter full screen. Here we go.
Hello everyone. Hello. Hello. And welcome to this performance of What I Don't Know About Autism. Now before we begin, there are a few things that we wanted to say.
This play is a relaxed performance. If you would need to leave the theatre during the performance, that's okay. And if you would like to come back in again, that's fine too.
If you find that you need to make noise or move around during the performance, we're grand with that.
If the person beside you is making a noise or moving during the performance, please don't feel like you need to shush.
Everything is okay. The house lights will remain on during the show, so even though the lights might go dark here on stage, there will always be light where you are sitting.
If you have a mobile phone, please don't leave the volume on or use the phone during the performance unless you have to.
The play is 58 pages long. That means it'll last about 80 minutes. It's broken into 26 scenes.
23, actually. We had to cut a few.
23 scenes, and you can see the names of the scenes on the whiteboards here.
When a scene is finished, we'll cross it out.
That way, you can keep track of how long has passed and how long is left.
As you can see, the play is also captioned. That means that everything that we say will appear back there.
There are some loud noises during the performance.
If you are sensitive to loud noises, please feel free to wear your ear defenders or earplugs during those parts. We'll let you know in advance if there is a loud bit coming up, so that you do have time to put them on.
Front of house staff have some spare sets of ear defenders if anybody needs them. Does anyone need them? If so, put your hand up now. And if you find that you need ear defenders during the performance, please feel free to collect them from the usher at the back.
There will be a 20-minute talkback at the end of the show. You can stay for this if you like, but if you prefer not to, that's fine too.
Please take note of your nearest fire exit, and in the extremely unlikely event of an emergency, please follow the instructions of staff.
That's it. We hope you enjoy the show.
Thank you.
Yeah. Have I stopped sharing, Eleanor? I think I have.
Yep. We're great.
Great.
We're back on you.
Okay, so the whole process of creating this play was underpinned by the maxim, nothing about us without us. This meant not just consulting with the artistic team and performers, but also sharing some of the work with the autistic community as we progressed. We had 2 development weeks with sharings and feedback at the end of each one. Additionally, we sought feedback from the members of the Autistic Paddy's social group on the poster design and also on some practical elements of the production, like whether captioning each performance would help or hinder accessibility. When we secured funding for the full production, we worked with all our partners on the show to try to create a template for a production that was not just inclusive of autistic audience members, but that also considered and accommodated the needs of autistic cast members. We were constantly questioning each part of the production process and trying to anticipate what the challenges might be. For example, we ran into complications with contracts. I felt it was important to provide our cast with plain English, easy to read contracts, rather than the reams of legal jargon that are typically handed out. We rang around other organisations for advice, but quickly discovered that there was no template to follow. Perhaps because there is a practice of arts participation rather than professional employment of disabled artists, and therefore the work is often not paid or is not a legal employment position. So this meant that we needed to create a bespoke template that was then scrutinised by a legal professional to ensure that it would suffice as a legal agreement. And then we tried to make the rehearsal room as relaxed as possible and to ensure that cast members' needs were considered at all times. And this is an interesting challenge as the theatre production process and model tends to get more stressful as it moves along and the prospect of opening night looms large. Time or the lack of it becomes a big pressure. So we needed to work against this pressure cooker scenario to make sure everyone's experiences could be as positive as possible. We had created a designated quiet space in a corner of the rehearsal room, but this too was a compromise because while it was certainly open to people to take time out there, the rehearsal room is often a bustling workspace, so the word quiet is more aspirational than an actuality. The rehearsal space itself was also located in a busy arts building with a shared kitchen dining space, so that presented another challenge. The lunchtime noise levels could be overwhelming as members of various different companies using the building for rehearsals would congregate together in the kitchen area. And then when we moved into the theatre spaces, we were able to brief staff and we ran our technical rehearsals differently to traditional, more high-intensity models. And we were also generally able to offer designated quiet spaces rather than a quiet corner. But the sensory challenges did vary from one venue to the next, as did the engagement of in-house staff with what we were trying to achieve. So we did encounter some unexpected challenges, but fortunately our team members were amazingly flexible and resilient. So I'm going to hand over to Eleanor again now to tell you a bit more about her experience working as an actor on the show.
As a performer, working on What I Don't Know About Autism was, as you can imagine already, a really unique experience. As an autistic actor and as a disabled actor, I'd never really had an experience before where I didn't feel like my disability was something to hide and to leave out of the room and out of the way of the work. But of course, when you have a pervasive disability, it doesn't always work like that. But as well as all of the structural accommodations in the production, like the quiet space and the relaxed rehearsal room, for example, what was really important was that the whole creative team was ready and willing to listen to us autistic team members and to take on board what we needed. it was an incredibly supportive environment. And this didn't stop at the autistic performers in the cast, but I think this, if you'll bear with me, this rising tide lifted up the boats of our two non-autistic cast members as well, in that they felt as uplifted and accepted and free as the rest of us did. And that made for a really great working environment where we could all bring our real selves and our best selves to the rehearsal room and to the show every night. We had a really interesting part of the show called question time. So at 3 points during the show, for 2 minutes each time, the audience could ask us questions about the scenes they've just seen, or about autism, or about us, anything at all. And we would answer as Eleanor and Jody and so on, out of character. So, because the show is called What I Don't Know About Autism. So we felt it was really important to say to everyone in the audience, it's okay if you don't know a lot about autism or anything about autism. You're welcome here and we'll get you up to speed. We also had a 20-minute Q&A after each show, a talk back with us, the cast, the director, the choreographer, and an autistic advocate who could answer some of the more specialized questions from the audience. As much as we in the theatre love the spontaneity of live performance, it's electric, I don't think every other show is racing to put these really unpredictable sections into their play, because we also love things to work like clockwork in a show, especially if you're autistic and on a show. So as a performer in What I Don't Know About Autism, we're all switching characters and roles in every scene, and then 3 times in every show that would stop. We break character, we face the audience as ourselves just for 2 minutes at a time, but it did involve a bit of mental gymnastics every time. Sometimes people in the audience would throw us a few curveballs. So for example, occasionally after a scene we have near the start of the show about ABA, in that question time, they might have a critique, or someone would have a question about our depiction of ABA, which isn't a bad thing in itself. But we had an experience one night where a gentleman in the audience told us that he didn't agree with our depiction of ABA. And I was holding a really big timer, so I can tell you that there was only 10 seconds left to answer his question. So all you can do in the time is say, thank you for your comment. We would love to talk more about this in the post-show Q&A when we have a bit more time. Sometimes we would get asked personal questions, not on purpose, I think, most of the time. And though we always felt empowered to say something like, that's very personal, can I answer it in a different way or a general way? Or that's a big question, can we come back to this in the Q&A later? My own experience as an advocate and a speaker was a really huge help to me in this. And I found that, this is another role I play during the show, Eleanor the advocate. Another useful thing is that question time could also reinforce points or themes from scenes just gone. For example, just before our last question time in the show, there is a scene where we discuss the sad reality that sometimes children, autistic children, are killed at the hands of their parents or caregivers. And at the next question time, one of the most frequent questions we would get was, someone would put their hand up and say, was that real though? Like, that doesn't happen, does it? And we had then the opportunity to go, unfortunately, yes, it does. And if we didn't have our question times, it makes me wonder, would people still be wondering about it after the show if they didn't already know? Because, the show wasn't just for autistic people. So not only were we playing a dozen different roles during the show as an ensemble, we will also interact with the audience as different versions of ourselves. It does sound unpredictable, but all of the accommodations in place to make it a relaxed production made it a safe enough space that we could play with this unpredictability. And it helps to foster a brilliant relationship and atmosphere between us and the audience. That they felt it was a safe space for them to ask their weird questions, especially because it was a relaxed performance. The lighting in the audience, the house lights, weren't completely dark. It was dimmed a bit, but it meant that not only could they see us, we could see them. Whereas usually when you're on stage, you don't really get to see the audience's faces. So that brought us closer together. And I don't know if I'll ever experience a relationship like that with an audience in another production ever again. It's very special. But
5 minutes.
Okay.
5 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So
should we move on then?
Yeah, I was Jody, then would you like to introduce the next section?
Yes, I would love to. So we're just going to read a scene from the play in which Eleanor plays an autistic woman called Sandra, who is having lunch with her mother in a cafe. I'm going to read her mum, and I'm going to read any of the stage directions that we think we'll need for the reading. Is that okay, Eleanor?
Yep, that's fine.
Oh, and if it's possible to spotlight both of us simultaneously for this scene, that would be really fantastic. Scene 9. I've met someone. Sandra and her mother are having lunch in a cafe. Sandra is doing all she can not to be grossed out by her mother's eating noises.
How's Dad?
He's grand. You know your dad.
How's Gran?
Good, her hip's much better.
I've met someone.
That's nice. Where did you meet?
Tinder. What?
Nothing.
No, come on, you might as well spit it out.
It's just Tinder.
Lots of people meet that way.
But they're not like you, are they?
Meaning?
There are people out there that would take advantage of people like you.
I can keep myself safe.
Can you?
For starters, I have a strict policy not to respond to anyone who sends me a willy photo.
Do people do that? Sandra shows her mother her phone. Mum is half fascinated, half disgusted, and then she gets too interested. Sandra grabs her phone back.
Mum?
Okay, well, that's a good rule to begin with. But what about other people?
I'm pretty discerning. It doesn't take me long to work out whether I like them or not.
I'm just worried you might miss some of the more subtle signals.
Wasn't that what all the social skills classes were for?
I don't know.
He's nice.
You've met him?
We had dinner.
Oh.
In the restaurant.
Right. And did you tell him?
Not yet.
Are you planning to?
Maybe. Oh, that's if he even agrees to meet me again. I left pretty abruptly.
I think you should be upfront. If you think it's going to be serious, he might have expectations.
I have expectations.
I know you do, but he might have different expectations. What if he wants children?
What if I want children?
What?
I've weighed it up. 1, overall worldwide population trends. 2, environmental factors. 3, how sleep deprivation might impact overall functioning. 4, work versus satisfaction.
What's the verdict?
I'd like 1 child, preferably female, vegetarian, about as autistic as I am, but not for 5 years. You don't approve.
It's not that.
Come on, you've got that face.
What face?
The, how am I going to argue this without sending her into a meltdown face?
Oh.
Yes.
You know, for someone who's meant to struggle with reading facial expressions, you're awfully perceptive.
Thank you. I've met this guy once. I'm not having babies just yet.
Just be careful, okay? Thanks. So I'm going to really quickly wrap up. We had planned to play a song at the end, which is about 4 minutes long, but what I can do is post that maybe in a chat or in the Discord room instead, so that we still get 15 minutes for questions. So just to wrap up, not everything was perfect about the show, and we were constantly learning as we went through the process, but the ultimate outcomes of What I Don't Know About Autism were overwhelmingly positive. Teachers told us that they learned more from 80 minutes at the theatre than they had from years of autism training. Family members explained that they would treat their autistic child or children differently because of what they'd seen. For example, not stopping the child from stimming at family gatherings, as they now understood its importance in self-regulation. And crucially, many autistic people said that they felt represented on stage for the first time. We're also very fortunate in that we've received funding to return the show to the stage for live audiences and also international streaming in co-production with the Abbey Theatre later this year. So we're now able to take what we learned from the initial run and develop and plan around that. Some key things for me will be being able to employ a designated welfare support person whose sole responsibility will be the performer's welfare during the production process. This means that there's someone that the actors can go to who's outside of the artistic process to confidentially articulate any challenges and or needs that arise. This time around, I'll be even more careful in making sure all team members are fully briefed, not assuming a basic level of understanding of the autistic community and the aims of the show, but ensuring these are fully communicated as we go into production. And then this last one is a broader goal. So when we created What I Don't Know About Autism, I was at the very beginning of my journey into disability culture. Everything about the production happened in an organic way. The actors presented themselves through a number of routes and came on board during the development process, and they were and absolutely are the right actors for this project. Each of them has contributed in a huge way, personally and professionally, to the evolution of the production. But two of the audience questions during those question times that Eleanor talked about stayed with me and keep coming back. So one was in relation to the lack of LGBTQ plus representation in the production, and the second was in relation to the absence of people of colour from the production. All of us here this evening know that autism doesn't exist in a vacuum, that it's not a white, straight, middle-class male identity. It is an intersectional experience, and the production didn't fully represent that. So my challenge to myself for future work and projects I'm involved in is to keep asking the question, who isn't here? Why are they not here? And how can I extend an invitation? And I'd just like to finally thank Shay Croak, Jason Murray, Matthew Raleigh, Paula McGlinchey and Eleanor Walsh, who were the actors in the show. And also just to say in that clip that we're going to hopefully post somewhere else with the song, there were some additional vocals in that, and that they're from students at the Morehouse School Frencham in the UK who collaborated with the Autistic Adult Choir in the UK for the production. So thank you so much.